going to be about what are you doing with your life. Now this is the number one question that I've been asked for the last 7 to 8 months of my life now. Giving you a little backstory, I had a full-time job in a corporate office, like 9 to 5, very common sort of job most people have, and I was miserable. And so I think about 2 years ago, I decided that I needed to leave it, but I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. And then 6 months ago, I just kind of pulled the ripcord and said, okay, like, we're just gonna do this and see what happens. And since then, everyone has asked me, what are you doing with your life? What's your plan? Like, where are you going? And I haven't really had an answer for them. And it's one of those things where, like, it's been a difficult thing to answer, but this passage has kind of gotten me through the last 6 months so far, and I'll read it to you. Passion and drive are not the same at all. Passion pulls you towards something you cannot resist. Drive pushes you towards something you feel compelled or obligated to do. And if you know nothing about yourself, you can't tell the difference. But once you gain a modicum of self-knowledge, you can express your passion. It's not about jumping through someone else's hoops. That's drive. And that last line is really important to me because I realized while I was doing all of these things in the background, I didn't really know that much about myself. There were people who thought that I was already pro in the cooking and gardening space and didn't realize I was working full-time in an office. And so I needed to just kind of like own that feeling that people already had about me and go for it. And then I went to Burning Man because that's kind of, I think, what is the impetus for a lot of people's jumps, like major leaps of faith. And I remember seeing this on the top of the man and said, I will be better, I will do more, I will not be afraid. And I found myself at a friend's camp. They have the spice camp, and we were just cooking up a storm in our camp, making like just ridiculous food, like mole out of Hormel chili. And everyone's like, do you do this for a living? Like, are you a professional chef? And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. You know, I'm just kind of starting to own the idea of doing the things I was passionate about, but not really knowing where that was going to take me, not making money on it at this point, just doing it because I really loved it. After Burning Man, I had quit my job right before Burning Man. And after Burning Man, I decided quitting my job wasn't enough. Despite the fact that I'd spent the last 10 years of my life creating this network in Los Angeles, I needed something different. And I was offered the opportunity to go and work for a family as a private chef internationally. But it wasn't going to pay enough to pay my rent and to pay all of my bills. So I had to make the decision, in order to do this, to just cut and run. So I took 12 years worth of stuff and all of the things I'd collected over that amount of time, and I sold them, and I got out of LA within a month, which was a little bit insane. And everyone's like, what are you doing? Like, you're leaving all of this stuff. And I'm just like, well, this doesn't feel right, and I want this other opportunity, and this is the only way to afford it. This was the last roadmap I had. That was in October. I haven't actually had a map that I could follow since, and a lot of people go like, I'm here to get a game plan, I'm here to know what you do, and like, this is as close to a roadmap as you're going to get. It's a literal one. And that was basically, I decided to move home, and I moved in with my dad. And the idea was, well, I'll go and I'll stay with friends that I've never stayed with along the way and have this like grand finale, like big blowout adventure where I spend half of the money that I've saved and at least get to see part of the country I've never seen before. And that was great. It took me a week and a half to actually do a 4-day trip. That's a little bit from that trip. So I was driving across a lot of open road by myself, seeing friends here and there in between, just asking myself this question at this point that everyone had been asking me, what are you doing with your life? We made a lot of food, I made a lot of friends, and they kind of started to shape that question, but they're like, well, you're doing something with your life, you're doing this road trip, and I'm like, what comes after that? We're so used to planning, just like trying to plan out, and it's not really possible when you don't actually have a roadmap, when you don't have this job and somebody telling you where it's going. So I'm going to move forward with this. The thing that I came up with driving somewhere between Amarillo and Dallas in that last like long 8 or 10 hour stretch of just flat open road was that this was what I needed to think about the most. And basically it was things I want to learn about, things I'm good at doing, and things I like to do. And I was like, okay, well, what I want to learn about is more in the growing space. I want to learn more about permaculture. I want to work on all of these various things. I like to garden. I like to play with flavor. I like to feed people. And I'm good at feeding people and introducing them to new flavors and taking care of people. So I said, okay, well then put all of these things together. I have this job in January. It's October. What am I going to do in this amount of time in between? And so I spent a lot of time in Oklahoma. My dad has a little piece of property out there, and I decided I want to start digging into permaculture more and learning about this. Mind you, I'm not getting paid to do any of this. I'm just doing it because I'm very passionate about it, and I love playing in this space. But I was also doing this, where I was working promo jobs in Walmart and Target just to make enough money in order to pay the bills that were still happening in the background. And that's why I say if it were easy, everyone would be doing it, is because it's not even that the work in between is that difficult, it's that mentally it can be a little bit crushing. When you go from doing something where everyone sees you as you have all of it together, and then all of a sudden it's oh, you're working at Walmart or Target, what are you doing with your life? Then I got to Uruguay. So fast forward to January, and I got to this job that I had lined up, fight through these months. Filling in the gaps and figuring out how to make enough money. And the goal was to find a space in which I could experiment, I could explore, and I could learn, I could play, and really just dig into the stuff I was passionate about on a larger scale. I wanted to focus more on figuring out what global problems were, and that was the basis of traveling, and figuring out what food looks like in other countries. And learning how to do the various cooking techniques. I got to work with asadores who were cooking these giant barbecues for us, and then replicate what I had learned from them in that process. And I was really lucky to have a full-blown organic garden that had been set up there prior to when I arrived, which was part of the reason I was hired for this gig. It was just to work with really fresh, homegrown produce, and it was really cool because the assistant that I was working with and the family I was working with, they would take pictures of all of the vegetable arrangements that I would put together. And I realized that I also really liked making things beautiful. So as I was progressing throughout this journey, it was figuring out more things that fit into, there's a beautiful one. It was figuring out more things that fit into these circles. So now the things that I wanted to learn about, the things I wanted to do, it shifted a little bit. So I figured out that the things I was good at doing was the work that I needed to do to pay the bills that I had in order to fund the research I wanted to do, which is the things I wanted to learn about. Which means the things I wanted to learn about were the projects that I had time to do, because I bought my time back, because I did enough work that paid enough money so that I could take my time the month after this for pennies on the dollar and just sit and research and learn and write and explore. And then the things that I'm good at doing, the things that I like to do is kind of the big goal in the distance. So it's going, this is something that I'm pushing towards. This is something that I'm willing to do, no matter what. And it's the permaculture project. So all of these things start to work together in this circle. And when people go, what are you doing with your life? I realize I don't have an answer for that, this direct, because I don't have a 1 year or 5 year plan. I have a 15 or 20 year plan, which most people don't. I don't think that most people are thinking that far. And it's a little terrifying, to be honest. And so I spent all of February in Buenos Aires, just exploring, being really broke, because I had bought that time. I did my budget and I said, okay, I'm making this much in January. I don't have an overhead anymore. I'm not paying rent anymore. I have, a healthy appetite for expensive dining, but I can do less of those sorts of trips. And just figuring out the local food, learning about the culture there, digging into some research for other projects that I hadn't had time to really look at because I had been working 40 to 60 hours a week and I'd get home exhausted. Now, my entire goal for every day for the 5 weeks was whatever I wanted it to be. It could be wandering down the streets for 8 hours, which I did. And I walked like 15 kilometers that day. It could be, digging through bins in Chinatown and going home and cooking with ingredients that I'd never seen and had to research. It could be stalking Anthony Bourdain, which I also did. I do not regret that. And then I had a friend one day when I was in Buenos Aires, because it got it's weird being in a space by yourself where you don't know anyone, and I was having one of these days where someone had asked me, what are you doing with your life? And it started to sink back in that I was in this space, that I had not been working, that I was essentially playing according to everyone who saw me posting updates on Facebook. And I had a friend I hadn't talked to in 10 years message me, and they said, I just wanted to tell you this because you're really inspiring me. And you are doing everything that we are intended to do, but don't have the courage to. And that just sent chills down my spine, because when you think that you might be on the wrong path, when people question it and they don't understand it, and they say, I don't get it, it doesn't seem like a real plan, maybe you should do this instead. I mean, it goes back to that the first passage, which is there's a big difference between passion and drive. And so this was my office in Buenos Aires. It was literally sitting down, and there were times where I was working on spreadsheets, there were times, but it was all food driven. And so it wasn't just wandering the streets. But I do want to mention that important part of all of this is if you manage to buy your time back for pennies on the dollar like I did, do form a schedule and do the work and make sure that you're plugging in and make sure that you're working on things, because the minute that falls out of balance, because you don't have a boss or anyone telling you what to do, you're going to feel a little bit lost. And as long as you have something that you're able to plug in and you feel like you're making this incremental progress on a daily basis towards whatever your goal is, then you're not ever going to be completely lost. And so these are the questions I want to leave you guys with. If you're kind of in a space where you're I want to do something like that. I want to, go and travel and adventure and find something that I care more about. Is what do you care about? What are you passionate about? What gets you out of bed in the morning? I hate when people ask, what do you do? Because it's oh, I'm a private chef, or I'm a gardener, or whatever. But that's not really the bottom line. It's I care about food. I care about exposing people to new flavors and new ideas and getting them really stoked about eating something other than Soylent, although Soylent guys are great. But it's something that it's so innate as a human to have connection with food. So getting people to reclaim that connection. And then what do you want to learn about? I think it's really important to ask yourself if you want to learn about whatever you're doing. Because if you don't, you're just going to be bored, you're going to go through the motions, it's not going to matter to you. But if you're actually passionately curious and you find yourself falling down rabbit holes on Google where you go to search something and then you realize 5 hours have gone by and you're just researching and reading the next article and going, what does that mean? Chase that, because you're going to want to do that every single day. And that's the best feeling in the world, is just to realize you've lost an entire day to something that you care about and you've learned a lot about it. And then I think the final question will be, what will you do when the robots take your job? So if you're doing a job right now and it can be automated, then start thinking about these first two questions, because I think that as humans we do need a sense of purpose. We need a reason to get up in the morning, and so if you don't have something that fits that bill, it's good to start thinking about it now, because the robot armies are coming, I'm just saying. There's my contact info, in case you want to get in touch, in case you know anyone who needs a private chef or wants to set up a garden or just talk about food in general. I do lots of delicious looking food pictures on all of those social media sites. And I have not changed my handle because I haven't decided where I'm landing next. So I'm still Veronica in LA, but you can also email me. I don't know if we have time for questions. Yeah? If there's any questions.
What is your 20-year plan?
So my 20-year plan, it's funny because I just bought a domain, but I'm not announcing it yet. But the 20-year plan is that I'm working on a permaculture food forest in southeastern Oklahoma. And basically the property that my dad wants to retire on, I'm looking at ways to grow food products in the existing landscape. So basically looking at, it's a matching or marriage of the pH of the soil plus crops that are already growing in like a wild form, and then finding crops that are in the same sort of families, and then planting them, and then eventually having like a very small restaurant there. So, yeah. Thank you.